Okay, we are going to get started now. So thank you all for being here. Welcome. Good evening and welcome to the National Design Centre for this Visions of the Future discussion event. We do have a small and socially distanced audience tonight, as is the new norm. It's much smaller than our usual audience size, and that's a sign of the very difficult year that we've all had. And talking about difficulties, I think, always helps with resolving them. So that's what we're doing tonight. We'll be holding a design lens to the post-pandemic world. Meeting in person for an event does feel like something of a novelty now, doesn't it? And having my mask off around other people. So thanks to all of you who are here tonight. It's great, really great to be able to look out and see people in physical form. I'm Narelle Yabuka from the Design Singapore Council, or DSG, and it's my pleasure to be here with you tonight. But as we do all live in two worlds these days, you might also be joining us virtually for this session through a post-event video, which is appearing on the websites of Visions of the Future, DSG, and Design Anthology. The Visions of the Future website was developed by Design Anthology, who is our online and programming partner for the exhibition. The site offers a virtual experience of the exhibition content, and you can find it at visionsofthefuture.sg. For those of us here IRL tonight, I'd like to remind you please to observe the required safety measures. Please make sure you have your mask on at all times. Please keep a 1 metre distance between individuals, and please avoid physical contact such as handshaking during the event. We do have hand sanitizer at the front there and also in the lift lobby, and you're welcome to use that. And thank you for adhering to these guidelines. And of course, some things don't change, pandemic or not, so please make sure your devices are set to silent mode. Tonight's event, titled Design for a Post-Pandemic World, is the first of 3 panel discussions that will investigate the work presented in the Visions of the Future exhibition, which is currently on show downstairs. Now, this is a sort of a closing ceremony of sorts for the exhibition, which is actually ending tonight. But of course, the digital exhibition will go on, so do head there if you'd like to take another look at the work. This panel discussion and the 2 upcoming ones are developed by Design Anthology, and our thanks go to the Editor-in-Chief Susie Annetta and her team for their efforts. Tonight we'll focus on the exhibited work of 4 of the emerging Singapore designers featured in the show. They're all here tonight. We'll also be prodding at the themes that arise from the show, and I'm very certain that they're all going to resonate with us all, whether or not we are designers. I'm going to sit down and get comfy. I'm not used to wearing heels these days. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background to the exhibition. The Visions of the Future is the first show that we've held in the National Design Centre atrium space since the reopening of the venue, which happened in August. The show was produced by DSG and curated and designed by Wendy Chua and Gustavo Maggio of Forest and Whale. The exhibition construction was by Superstructure, and the visual identity is by Fifth Column. The show features the work of a number of Singapore's next gen of design talent, and thanks to its curatorial angle of imagining new rituals for living, it's been a really timely meditation on what we should demand from the new normal. The show was actually a long time in the making, and it began with an open call to emerging Singapore designers back in 2019. Originally, it was planned for a showing in Italy during Milan Design Week 2020, which of course was cancelled. And as Wendy described in her curator's note accompanying the show, the designers had been developing many of the ideas within the exhibition since before the pandemic struck. But she rightly said, the futures they envision remain pertinent, if not urgent, in light of the harsh realities and inequalities that ignited during this public health crisis. It does feel right that a show based on visioning the future focuses on the younger generation of designers, because after all, they're the ones who have the greatest hand in shaping that future. And to echo the words of DSG's Executive Director Mark Wee, this exhibition is just one of the ways that DSG develops the next generation of design talent, and we hope to run a lot more capability development initiatives in the years to come. So why does it make sense to talk about design for a post-pandemic world? Well, as we're all waiting for the rollout of vaccines in 2021, and there's a feeling that this could be a really pivotal moment. But it's one that I think is really underscored by, uncertainty, trepidation, and especially given that emergence of the new strain of the virus. So it's really easy to wonder, are the lifestyles that we knew in 2019 now permanently past tense? Will we have them back at all? And, we could feel completely dislocated and fearful. But for those of us who've got a vested interest in design, I think we owe it to ourselves and to others to also side with hope and progress despite the fear. And we have the unique position to use design proactively to shape the new normal sensitively and with intelligence as well. So the designers featured in the Visions of the Future show that this is an opportunity to scrutinise the values that we're bringing to the world through design. We've got the chance now to reset our position on the very purpose of design. And tonight we're lucky to have Kevin, Yunroo, right? Yeah. It's the first time meeting everybody in person. Got to make sure I have everybody's names right. Sheryl and Ying Xuan with us as speakers, and we'll see their work as well as other pieces from the exhibition in our accompanying slideshow tonight. Okay, we're almost ready for the questions, but I'd just like to introduce each of you first to give everybody a sense of who you are. So Sheryl is number 3 over there. Sheryl Teng is an industrial designer and producer, and she's currently working in the studio of Hans Tan. Her key focal points are materiality and tactility, and her works explore relationships between materials, people, and objects, as you'll see in her Visions of the Future project, Pneumatics Touch. Yunroo, second chair there. Poh Yun Ru is a socially engaged product designer and also a teaching assistant in industrial design, currently working at the Design Incubation Centre at NUS. She focuses on creating a positive impact on society by improving the lives of others, illustrated beautifully in her work Rewind, a device for seniors. Ying Xuan Teo, in the 4th chair over there, is a multidisciplinary designer currently working in the furniture sector. She graduated from the Design Academy Eindhoven, and she seeks to revive the joy of making what we use. Her exhibited project, Mass Production of Happiness, a soap-making system, is part of a collection that she hopes to evolve further as she reimagines our ecosystem of industrial design. And beside me, Kevin Chiam is an industrial designer by training, but he's currently working in UI, UX and strategy design at Deloitte Digital. He graduated from the Royal College of Art and Imperial College in London. His work on inclusive design has won various international awards, congratulations, and he's exhibited 3 projects in Visions of the Future. Echo, a product to prompt rapid building evacuation. Odor Ring, a piece of jewellery that discourages the wearer from touching their face, and soap tattoos, which he designed with Nacho Villanova, a motivational soap for kids. So please join me in welcoming them all with a round of applause. Okay, my first icebreaker question for all of you is, what's a design or a design-related initiative that you've seen during the pandemic, and it could be by anyone in the world, that really resonated with you, and what does it say to you about design's potential? Would you like to go first, Kevin?
Yeah, well, so I guess one of the more memorable projects, personally, that resonated strongly with me is a project by this company called Kendo. It's a tech company that's based in Israel, in particular the Israeli city, and basically they use, or rather they focus on waste management. Their strengths lie in data visualization. And so what was unique and what was their contribution to the COVID situation was that they found that you can actually detect the virus in the wastewater, or rather the sewage, right? And they are able to actually detect it much faster, and you can visualize that information and pass that information to sort of accelerate certain government initiatives to curb the spread of COVID-19. So I think that is something that was, to me, I felt it's quite a brilliant initiative, simply because they started with a very unconventional perspective. So we're not looking at swapping people and getting samples from laser passages, but rather it's more about understanding where else are you able to detect and present the information in a way that is very helpful to the public. So I guess in a way, this is where design can also be helpful in a pandemic. Right? not just in the literal sense, but also in the way of providing information that is tangible.
Yeah, and I guess visualizing that information as well. Yunroo?
Okay, so for me, I think it's a little project by Anita Kapoor. So what she did was like a platform to allow people to kind of send their recordings of like their life experiences during the lockdown period. I think what I really like about what she did was how it allowed people to easily like connect, to share, to speak, and allow us to like listen and to kind of care for others in this period of time, and to also pay attention to what kind of evolve and change. And this is what I'm actually trying to do during for my project now. If you see the exhibition, I have an object of memory where I kind of collectively want people to contribute in providing contents that will help elderly from different cultural background. Yeah, so I feel design to me is quite important that we kind of connect people together. Yeah, so
sort of building on empathy.
Yeah.
Okay, Cheryl?
For me, it's not a project that came out of pandemic per se, but is this project by Argentina student designer. I mean, it was a student project called Aldana Garcia. It's the sky window. She did that when she was in RCA. I really like that project. I think that project to me related quite strongly with COVID because it was about we spend a lot of time at home right now, right? And we want to get especially during circuit breaker, we wanted to get out, and the more sky window is actually a hybrid between a balcony and a window where you can lay back and look at and gaze at the sky, almost like you're out there. And I think that's it's quite amazing to me how like something that was designed, she designed it in 2018 or 2019 if I'm not wrong, something that was designed prior could be something so relevant in the current climate. Yeah. So that's
Ying Xuan?
For me, it's not so much of a project, but it's an initiative that started just during the COVID, where it was founded, it's called Design Emergency, then it's founded by Alice Roston and Paolo Antonelli, if I pronounce her name correctly. And actually they just brought in, like, it's just a platform where they talk to a lot of designers from all over the world to discuss about the pandemic. And I thought that it's a really nice initiative because, like, for example, we are all supposed to go to Milan, where you are physically at an exhibition, but then now everything has gone online and it's so much more accessible for not just for designers but for everyone. And like they actually conduct like live interviews very frequently with like different designers to just discuss about the pandemic. And I thought that was like the kind of information that was very accessible and like about the research and all these things behind that actually not so much resonate, but I think it's a good initiative that inspires me as like a researcher and a designer.
Yeah, I've been following that IG account as well myself. Yeah. Okay, so there's quite a bit of emphasis on human connection in what you've said. So what has the past year been like for all of you on a personal level and as a designer? How has your life and your design discipline been affected by COVID-19? Maybe I'll start with you, Cheryl. Just trying to mix it up.
Okay. For me, I thought it was a rather refreshing year because it never occurred to me like how much more connected and dependent to the community we actually are. Because myself, I'm a maker, designer. I make most of my pieces myself. I mean, I have a few pieces that are fabricated, but I realized that even though I make most of the pieces myself, I rely a lot on my community, like the materials that I purchase. Like connecting with fabricators, and I realized that actually, no matter how independent you are part of the community. Yeah, so that's that.
Yunroo?
I think for me, because I'm working in a school context, with the immediate shift to like virtual learning, I think I saw how like the pandemic kind of like affect the students with the struggle with all this like uncertainty, and how we kind of like think about like how we could learn design from home as well, because with this like virtual learning thing, and even when there are so many online resources available, I feel that there's still this lacking of like how we could provide multidisciplinary learning. the hands-on learning and soft skills to connect with like people and stuff like that. So I think it was like a struggle for the student and also for the staff as well. And I kind of feel less connected to the rest because I think many of us also feel that way to like what our colleagues or like the people that we kind of used to work with, to collaborate with, we kind of like detach from each other a bit, even though we can connect with each other through online. So yeah, I think the pandemic kind of elevate the importance of human interaction. Yeah.
Does feel like we have a little bit of screen fatigue setting in. Okay, Ying Xuan, for you, what's life been like?
I think most of it online, I would say. And I think it's very much like related to the previous question that you asked about how all this information is so accessible. And I think like having all these like design information online, I think I still quite enjoy being a designer. Although I also, like Cheryl, I also make a lot of stuff like very hands-on. But I think for me, what impacted me the most was more on the environment, like knowing that, of course, not being able to be physically be at a show, we lose something like the tactility and the kind of interaction we have with people, but we see that there's a lot of like good impact for the environment and for our earth, like whether it's like the air quality or like sustainability. And I think that's the thing, that we lose something, but we also gain a lot. And I think that's for me the biggest impact for. Yeah.
So you're referring to the show in Milan that didn't happen?
Just in general, like how all these informations are just going online and it's much more easy to access. Yeah, compared.
Yeah, we need to find the middle ground, don't we?
Yeah.
And Kevin, for you, how's your life and your discipline been affected by COVID?
So I guess in general it has been a very sobering experience for the past year. More so when I was, because I graduated this year, last year, in London, and I could see there is definitely a huge difference in the way that different people would approach the pandemic. So I would say it's sobering because there are definitely moments where it's dotted with isolation. Not that we choose to, but we are sort of set in the situation for the better of ourselves, as well as for the community. But I guess the silver lining behind all this is that we start to see two things. One is that people are really creative, or designers are really creative. Right? We start to pivot, we start to think about how else can we reach our needs, how else can we design around things, even if we do not have the capability to be there physically. So that's one thing. I think the other one is we start to appreciate what we have, whether it's, like what Cheryl said, community that we have, or the resources that we used to have. So I guess these are the two things that I'm rather thankful for. One is that I get to appreciate things better, my family better, and the other one is the fact that it reminds us of how creative we can be and how we can think about alternative methods to solve problems.
Okay, I'm going to stick with you, Kevin, and I want to talk about what defines the before COVID and the after COVID state of mind, and how's the pandemic influenced how you're thinking about your design practice?
So I would say, perhaps in a nutshell, what defines pre-COVID and post-COVID is often this shift in our needs. Right? There is, if not sure if everyone is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right? Essentially, what it does, or what it explains, is how our actions are driven by a certain set of needs, starting with our physiological needs. So we need to have food, have shelter, and then move up slightly higher to safety needs, and eventually our identity, so self-actualization. And what defines the pre-COVID and the post-COVID is how there is certain emphasis on certain needs. So I'm sure all of us will realize that during the pandemic period, or even during this phase 3, right, in Singapore, we find that there is a certain emphasis on safety needs, or the need to connect, the sense of connection. So that I believe is what sets the difference. Right? There's more pronounced desire to connect, not just virtually, but also physically. So how that has affected me, I would say generally in my practice and in the way I see things, I'm always focused on two things. One is behavior, not necessarily just human behavior, but also the people or the organisms around us, and how the behavior impact the environment. So I would say, if anything, the pandemic has validated or rather sort of shown that it is important to get them into these two things. So how people behave, as well as how people react in certain situations.
How about for you, Yunroo, the pre and post state of mind, and how has that affected your design practice?
For me, it didn't really change or influence the way I kind of practice and stuff like that, because I feel the pandemic is like demanding for all kinds of change, but change is like what design does, because we are trained to anticipate, to look far, and to anticipate this kind of situation, to feel this issue and the situation. So I feel like it didn't really affect me, and if you were to see my project, like I didn't wait for the pandemic to happen in order to design this, but we focus more on care and also like elderly, which is like the issue that we already have, like aging population and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's what it didn't really affect so much of the design practice.
Did it affect your practice, Cheryl?
I think if anything, it affirmed my values, the things I'm interested in for my in my design practice. So actually, I enjoy working with materials. I enjoy like very tactile experiences. And during COVID, I think before COVID, we were a little bit more like everyone has a very fast pace of living. We travel from one place to another without being very conscious or aware of what we're coming in contact with. But the circuit breaker being at home the whole period for 3+ months, I think it made. I mean, we are still very fast paced. We're Singapore. I think it's in our blood. We can't get rid of this like effectiveness, efficiency kind of like mindset. But I think there's an added level of mindfulness, because I mean, partially out of fear, because like we're more concerned about like the surfaces that we come in contact with. But at the same time, I think because we spend so much time within the four walls, isolated at home with our families, with the same objects, we grow to be a bit more aware of like the different objects that we come in contact with. Like for example, me and myself at home, I mean, with my family, I got to cook a lot more during this COVID period. So I developed like this relationship with the different kitchen utensils and tools at home, like why I like certain woks better, why I like certain pans better, because of like how it works, if it's easier to wash and stuff like that. So I think because of that, then it made me appreciate like the propensities of different materials even better. Yeah.
Ying Xuan?
I think in terms of sustainability, it affected a bit for me, because like for my project, actually, I'm looking into how we don't want to contribute to like plastic waste, and I think in the past I tried to look at it at a very small scale, because like sustainability is such a big word and you're always a bit afraid to approach it. But then through the COVID, I also feel like the impact just hit so hard, and suddenly you just see like masks on the floor, disposable packaging everywhere because of food deliveries, even with like all the stop of production in factories. And it really made me like think twice about like our buying decisions, and even like the luxury to travel and all these things. So I think sustainability has always been something that I think about, but then maybe I need to think bigger than like what I am at the moment. So in that sense, I think it has affected, my thinking.
Okay, I'd like to ask about change, because we've all experienced rapid change over the last year, and as you've said, we've realised that we actually can adapt. It's not that hard. But what's the past year revealed to you about how change happens? Does it always have to be a top-down process? Can the public feel empowered and enabled to make change as well? And what are some of the most significant changes you've been observing? Kevin?
Well, personally, I guess often change, or rather what defines a successful change, is one where it's often two-pronged or multiple-pronged. So in this case, of course, there would be top-down initiatives, naturally certain policies in place, but there would also be, I believe, on the grassroots level, initiatives that are used to accelerate that change or to bring about a successful or meaningful outcome. So just to give an example, during the circuit breaker, the local hawkers had a tough time, simply because some of the hawkers may not be on registered platforms for delivery, and hence they do not get the exposure that they require. Right? So of course there are certain reliefs and certain support that's provided by government or certain organizations. But it's also heartening to see that there are local initiatives by creatives. So for example, I think local photographer Sheryl Teng, he offered donated his talent to help take these photos for the hawkers and put them on social media to sort of increase the exposure. So that is, in a way, it's a win-win situation, right? One of the wins is that the hawkers, they get their food, sort of, that there's greater exposure for them, and therefore there's potentially greater revenue. But at the same time, it's also a way for Cheryl as a creative to build their relationship, and that would be an opportunity. So I guess what this highlights is, one is that this pandemic sort of changed the way that we perceive how things can be done, so businesses. And I think the second one is that it's quite heartening to see how we can use technology to pivot businesses, and not just businesses, but also the way we think about how things go.
Yeah, there's potential for agency for yourself and to create it for others as well. Okay, how about you, Cheryl?
I think I agree with Kevin. I think it's both. For sure, authority. Singaporeans, we're quite obedient to the authorities for sure. But at the same time, I think that the community has a huge part to play. Not just designers. As designers, we do. I don't know if I can speak for most designers, but my impression is that most designers who want to make a change, like we're designers because we want to make a change. And aside from that, I think there's a lot of community efforts, like perhaps it's ripple effect, like even from like neighbors, like putting hand sanitizers in lifts for everyone to share, to make a change, to make everyone more aware, to like aunties sharing like different ways of pressing the lift buttons to like kind of keep your hands free during the COVID period. And another thing that I kind of noticed, change from the community is that during the circuit breaker period, there was a spike in numbers of small businesses, entrepreneurs doing like little crafty, like making things on their own and like doing bakes and stuff. I think in a way it's comfort for themselves, but at the same time when they sell these products, when they are sold to other people, it's comfort for other people as well. So I think that there are many ways that everyone can make a change. Yeah. So it's both top down and also as an individual. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to jump to your projects, and just in case people aren't fully familiar with your work, could you each give us a bit of a rundown of what your project's about and what makes it particularly relevant to the pandemic era? Should we jump back to the project slides? Who'd like to start? Who have we got? Cheryl, you're going first.
My project. Okay, so for me, it's kind of threading like in between the role of clothing. For like what is clothing for? Could it be for objects and spaces and furniture as well? And actually, I started this project as my thesis project because I was interested in. I came from a family background where my mom and my aunts, they were seamstresses, so I was interested in like rethinking like how. And I have this special thing for clothing already. And coming from an industrial design background, I think I was very interested in like. Figuring out, I think it was a self-exploration journey to figure out like how can industrial design value add to like the clothing construction industry. And also so I started like playing with different materials, and I found this very interesting material that was used for waterproofing typically, and I used it as I was trying out, and then I found out that it could create this pleating pattern with this very normal handheld heat sealer that I found to create air pockets. And then through these air pockets, I instead of just like it's kind of a reverse process. It's instead of form follows. Sorry, is it? Sorry. Yeah, form follows function. It's function follows form, or maybe like function follows material, and function follows the idea of like using this textile and using air, this resource that is so readily available around us, free of charge, and creating meaningful objects with it. Yeah.
Could we jump to Yunroo's slides?
So for my project, it's actually Rewind. It's a platform that leverages on familiar gestures and multi-sensory stimulations to prompt meaningful recollections for elderly with dementia. I think as the society gradually coped with adjusting the new normals, during this pandemic period, we find ourselves like forgetting the struggles of elderly, especially those with dementia. They are more unbearable because they are being confined to stay at home, because most of us encourage the elderly to stay at home. And I feel the lack of activities kind of like cause their condition to rapidly deteriorate even more. And so that let me think about like how we could use technology for once to kind of like connect the elderly with the family members. And this led me to design like new activities that using technology to help elderly during this period of time. Yeah. Okay. Insha?
Okay, my project is a soap machine called the Mass Production of Happiness. Honestly, I didn't design this for the pandemic, but then like when I designed the soap machine, it was just like purely out of like fascinations for like machines, and suddenly the pandemic happened and I got a little bit relevant.
A little bit. This is an ideal product for the pandemic from my point of view. Not only making soap, but making such a wonderful experience as well.
But then the whole idea behind it, like the bigger idea is actually still back to sustainability, because like within the cosmetic industries, one of the biggest waste product is actually soap bottles, and the whole project is actually to envision a future with no more soap bottles, but just like an additional new ritual that helps with the environment. So like maybe now, if we are cleaning ourselves, we contribute waste, and then we're not cleaning the environment. So with a machine, when you clean yourself, you're also indirectly helping to clean the environment. And yeah, besides washing hands, I think, that's the bigger idea behind it. Yeah.
And Kevin, you have 3 projects.
Yeah, I mean, since we're all being honest, the first project, which is Echo, is definitely not designed for the pandemic, right? But the theme, right, that Echo represents is safety, and I believe safety in a building is often very relevant, and often very important, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not. Right? So essentially, what Echo is it stems from a behavior insight that when we hear an alarm in Singapore, or rather in the UK, when I was working on this project, people tend not to move, right? They tend to dismiss it as a false alarm because we're conditioned to be due to all the fire drills and so on and so forth, right? And so what I wanted to do was to leverage on fear, which is actually a natural defense mechanism for people, right, to get to safety, and to use fear in a very constructive way. So I sort of represented fear in the form of tension, that's represented as a balloon, or rather an inflatable. And what happens is people have this irrational fear of balloons expanding, not for the fact that they will pop, but for the fact that they are not sure when they will pop. Right? So that sort of nudges people to move away from danger. The second part, of course, for Echo is that it also helps to facilitate pathfinding, so it's able to be deployed as it expands to sort of block out certain pathways that are lost to fire or overcrowded. The next 2 projects are more focused on hygiene in particular, which is, I guess, more highlighted, right? That was highlighted during the pandemic. Right? Hygiene is very important. The first project is odoring, right? It uses, again, our natural response to bad odor to keep our hands away. And why I decided to do that? Well, it's quite simple. The thing is that people, right, in general, we touch our faces unconsciously, whether you believe it or not. Over the last hour, about 20 to 30 times. And we do this uncontrollably, right? It's part of our bodily.
Has there been any studies? Do we still do it as much? Have we got it in our brains now during pandemic not to do that?
I guess the education does help, but these things are something that is very intrinsic. Right? We naturally do ourselves. And I guess what I tried to do was to design a countermeasure in a way that utilizes another natural response to a natural behavior that we tend to have. And the last project is soap tattoos, right? It appeals generally to children's sense of wonder and curiosity, because at that age they are very natural explorers. But because they're explorers, their hands are often dirty, right? So the idea of cleaning is very counterintuitive. since they spend most of their time getting dirty, right? And so what happens is we see soap stickers or tattoos. They're essentially stickers with a soap film at the top that adults or the parents can apply on the children. And so the adult can use it as a training tool, but also a motivation to get children to wash their hands. And because their goal is not to wash their hands, but rather to unveil the graphic motif behind the soap facade. And they can do so when water is up.
Okay, thanks everyone. When I looked at your projects, across a lot of them, what I was seeing was a real sense of the intangible surfacing, of things not being entirely fixed. So, more emphasis on process rather than on, the fixed final form of things. So for each of you, why do you think that is? What does that say about the kinds of relationships that we want to have with things these days? And what does it say about the role of the user of the object? Who'd like to field that one first? Ying Xuan?
Okay. I think personally, I think I appreciate process more than results. Maybe in the nature of like being someone who's into research, I also feel like that's something that I appreciate the most, like the process of researching. And also that actually in my project itself, the whole idea is the process. So sorry, can I maybe have the image? Yeah, so actually if you look at the machine, right, the final product was never like the actual final result of the project, but the whole idea is to design the whole process where you actually make your own soap and be aware of the things and ingredients that you choose for, and then you put it through the machine for self-care. So yeah. So what happens is that you have to put all the ingredients through, and then in the process of like the mixing of the materials, you get this foam, and what actually completes the product is actually the whole interaction with it. So what I imagine is more of, I think in such a fast-paced like lifestyle, what I design for is hopefully like something to help people slow down a little bit, even though it's just a very simple thing that we do every day.
So that's your selling point. It's no longer that you've got the most amazingly cool orange juicer.
But also the whole, like back to the question of process, like the whole idea of the mass production of happiness is actually inspired by how it's made videos. So most of the times it's also a personal fascination where I just sit there and just watch like how soap is produced, how anything is produced while running through all the machines, and it's the satisfaction that you get in this kind of videos that makes you addicted to this kind of videos. And I also try to like capture this because I feel like maybe it's just me, but a lot of people might also enjoy watching like these processes of production. Yeah.
Okay, Yunroo, would you like to go next?
I think for me, if you can see the four projects over here, it's not really led by marketing. Like we don't try to design to get a profit or anything. Like for myself, like it all started from the human dimension. And then maybe for Cheryl, she started more from the material and the property of materials. And you can see for Ancient, she's more from the usage point of view. And from the exhibition, you can see there are also like the cultural aspect. And so I feel like we all started, we all have like different entry points. Usually, design process, we all have like who are the target user, what do the user need, what are we trying to do to sell to them and stuff like that. It's always the marketing side. But if we were to ask ourselves, like, is all our project here suitable for the market? But what really defines the market? Yeah, so I feel that's the thing that is different because we all started from like different entry points and dimensions. So yeah.
That's exactly the interesting point. What defines the market? What do we want from things? Yeah, Cheryl, what do you think?
I think I share quite a similar point of view with Ying Xuan, but I think the interesting part for me is where the process coincides with the outcome. So for instance, like for Ying Xuan's work, it's the process is the outcome. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I think before maybe, sorry, I need to refer to. I think, yeah.
I'm just going to add for the audience, this is the first time all of these emerging designers have spoken on a panel, and I think they're doing an amazing job. So go, Cheryl, you can do it.
And I think that maybe what we're looking in nowadays, looking like maybe consumers, the market, is that there's a very strong buy and throw away culture. So in looking at these processes, when people learn to appreciate these processes, it's something that it's a form of connection between the object and the user itself. And it is this connection when it's like, for example, like I'm into materials, right? So for example, like Sori Yanagi's butterfly stool, or like Marcel Breuer's tubular chairs, like all those classics. We look at the object. We look at the form, it's beautiful, but what really connects us ultimately is because when we learn of the process, like how the material is being manipulated, or how it works behind that. It's like the Venn diagram overlapping kind of thing, and that's what creates this lasting impression that makes us want to keep these objects or use these objects for a longer period of time. And I think that is, so that's what we are looking at nowadays, I feel, people. Yeah.
I'm going to jump, I know that the clock is ticking, so I'm going to jump to a question about specific areas of design. So we were talking earlier about change, of course, in society and life brought about by the pandemic. What do you think still needs to change? And I'm going to ask each of you to include in your answer some reference to the context of your own project. So for Kevin, what change would you still like to see in terms of how we use our buildings?
Well, I guess the change that I would prefer to see is sort of the way spaces are being used in buildings. I guess, if anything, the pandemic revealed to us that spaces should not be permanent. They are rather impermanent. And the fact that we can be very creative with how we design spaces to accommodate the situation or to accommodate the needs of the space. So I believe that is something that is becoming particularly more important these days. And I would say what I would like to see is definitely perhaps the design of more intangible mediums that are impermanent, or rather it supports the creative usage of spaces. So for example, if you've been to the hawker center or you've been to what you see in the auditorium now, you see that a lot of tapes, right, that are being used. And often these tapes are thrown away, discarded, and they add to this environmental wastage, right? So I guess there could be impermanent mediums that potentially subline after a certain period of time. Right? So this, of course, just off the top of my head at this point. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there could be mediums that we can use to add to not just the space itself, but perhaps cater to the different rituals that we conduct in these spaces.
Interesting. We'll have to put you in touch with some architects and interior designers. So Yunroo, what change would you like to still see in terms of how we care for others and how we use technology?
I think first is to give special attention to those who are less familiar with technology, so that they can leverage on taking advantage of digital connection. As for the way we use tech, I think, like I mentioned previously, like how we could connect with people easily through tech, but I still believe and hope that we could connect with people we care more physically, because it's like an opportunity for designers to work closer with people. And I feel as designer we shouldn't use technology as the core, but more of harnessing the technology strength without losing the human factor.
Cheryl, for you, what change would you still like to see in terms of the interfaces we share with others?
For me, I think it's this factor of adaptability and interfaces that share a story of its own. I mean, not really interfaces, just objects. Like when we interact with, when I see interfaces, I don't really refer to UI, the user interface, but more of
physical interface.
Physical interface. So everything that we're in contact with, I consider that as an interface, and I would like to have it. Maybe we could look into adaptability and how meaningful this interface, subconsciously or not, interface with us. Yeah.
And Ying Xuan, what change would you like to see still in terms of how we care for ourselves and our environment?
I think little changes are also super valuable. as I mentioned earlier, I think like sustainability, and if we talk about our environment, it's always something that's such a big topic and we're afraid to approach it, like even for myself. And then I feel like every little difference that we make, right, makes a very big difference, because it always has to be a joint effort. And whether like you consciously decide to bring your own bag to the supermarket or bring a box to do a takeaway, you're making a little difference. And I think if we can create like more motivations for ourselves, like for example, if you decide to go natural, maybe you already help. So it's not like, it doesn't always have to be a very big action. And yeah, I hope that in that way we can motivate ourselves as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone. Is there any questions from the audience? Would anyone like to ask anything? No? Too small a group, okay. Then I'm going to finish up with one last question. Could you all tell me, what do you hope to address through design as you move forward through your career?
Personally, I hope to address the social impact that is led by the consumerist culture that we have. So I think this is something that has been brought up quite a little. I think like Cheryl as well on sustainability, the environmental concerns and related problems as well as concerns. So personally for me, for example, if you look at the masks that we wear, they inevitably contribute to this mountain of waste that we see. So you see them disintegrating, and they end up in the water stream that we have, the water we drink, end up in oceans. So that's something that I hope to be able to look at. I guess this also highlights the fact that there is a shift from user-centered design to environment-centered design. Not just in the sense of sustainability, but also considering the fact that we are not the only ones in the environment. There are also other organisms. There are pets, there are animals. Like for example, bees are extremely important because they are pollinators that provide food for us. So I guess there is this shift, and I'm heartened to know that there is more emphasis in such design.
Are you seeing that happening in design education? A sense of that shift and being conscious of that shift away from just thinking about yourself to thinking about you as part of an ecosystem?
Definitely. I would say there's a much more emphasis in institutions, not just in Singapore, but I guess also overseas, worldwide, where we are no longer just thinking about ourselves, but how collectively, if we don't survive together, then we won't survive.
Okay, Yunroo, what do you, as you progress through your career, what do you want to be addressing?
I hope to address, like through my design, like how more people can easily connect and contribute to improve the life of others. Because I strongly believe that with society strengthened through collaborative wellness very much. Yeah.
Cheryl?
For me, not really, like, how to say, I'm not really pushing forth for anything, but more of, I think it's more of a learning journey for myself to, because I think for me, I'm still like in this, I just graduated like 1 year plus ago, and I'm still trying to figure out like how do I bridge my interests in like clothing and like my background in industrial design, and observing like human behavior, like the relationship between human and objects. And I think in my career, I would like to like further like explore all these different aspects. Yeah.
Ying Xuan?
For me, in terms of career, in terms of design, I want to bring out like the stories of people. To be honest, like when working on the machine, I just would like to share like a process of my research. Is that after talking to a lot of people, I realized that, especially in Europe, a lot of people are actually choosing for soap bars or non-soap bottles. The only reason behind it is because they don't want to contribute to plastic waste. And like if I were to do this soap project on my own, I'll never get to this point, but it's all these people that gives me new perspectives. And through my design, I also want to bring out their perspectives on like sustainability or whether any topics that I'm actually working on. And yeah, I think it's all these people that actually help to finish up on this project. And on like how I actually formulate the whole project. And the next time like you guys go to a supermarket and decide to go for a non-soap bottle, then I think like that's what I want to like remind people of. Like you don't have to, but then maybe even thinking about it is already like making a difference. Yeah, so that's what like a little like a subtle stories of people actually change also. Yeah.
So what I've heard from you all is a real focus on empathy, like we said right from the beginning of this discussion, a focus on the ecosystem, not the self, a focus on process, and I think these are all really great things to move forward with using design into the future, and they should bode us well. So yeah, thank you all for your informed perspective, and I hope that it is bolstered by events like this and discussions like this and infiltrates the minds of more people. So thank you all, and to our audience in person and in video, thank you very much for joining us. Please join me in thanking our speakers. And so that will conclude the discussion event. You're welcome to continue enjoying the exhibition downstairs while it's still there before it comes down. But do remember to keep your mask on and keep your distance from others. And we wish you all a better 2021. Stay safe and well, and thank you and good night.